Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. In this podcast, your host, Lori and me, will interview published authors to chat about their work, journey to getting published, and their book recommendations. If you share a passion for books and always looking for your next read, then join us. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast. Today's guest is Kerrigan Byrne. Kerrigan writes historical romance with a touch of dark themes. In this episode, we chat about her latest two series, her writing process, and some book recommendations. Now let's go to the interview. Hi, Kerrigan. Welcome to the What to Read Next podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
So happy to have you here. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Let's see, a little bit about me. I live in the rain shadow of the Olympic Peninsula up in Washington, right by the coast, and I have a bunch of dogs, and I write historical romance, and I live a pretty boring life, and I know that now because we're all quarantined, and that is not a big difference from my regular everyday existence, except for now I wear a mask when I go grocery shopping. So, and I see my friends a little less. Yeah, but I just, I'm pretty hermity. I write a lot. I love playing video games. I love hiking. I do a lot of stuff alone. So, yeah.
I feel like, I don't know, for quarantine life, like, for me, it's changed some stuff, but for the most part, it's been like, I don't know, I've been in my lonely world, doing my thing, and now I work remotely, so I don't even have to get out of the house. So I think it's just it's an introvert's dream for me, like this whole quarantine stuff. There's stuff that gets to fatigue, but for the most part, it's not that bad.
Where are you from? Where do you live?
So I'm originally from Puerto Rico, but I've lived in New York for 14 years until 2 weeks prior to COVID hitting. So I just moved to Chicago. I planned to move to Chicago. So I moved in March 1st, and then COVID hit March 13th. So basically, I'm in a new city where I don't know anyone. So my in real life connections has been with essential workers, but it's totally fine. I've been staying connected. So my work in New York City hired me back. So now I'm working for the company, but I work remotely. So I work from Chicago. So
wow, that is crazy. That would be really hard.
It is. It's been fine. Like overall, I'm in a bigger space right now than I was in New York. So I'm grateful that I was not in New York while COVID was happening. And I'm grateful like I'm in a bigger space and I have a living room and I have a bedroom. And so there's pluses with that. I think it's interesting to be in a new city and feel strange. Like I don't know anyone. Like I know my neighborhood, but I haven't looked at Chicago. Like the jury's still out for Chicago if I want to stay or if I want to leave. But I think right now I'm just kind of like, it's just been, I got to know my apartment. I did a good job of picking that place. So
you had plenty of time to unpack because what was there else to do?
So it's been okay. So awesome. So what inspired you to become a writer?
I think just how much I used to read. I learned how to read really early, and it's really been the only thing I was good at. I have a diary from way back when I was a kid, and it says, I'm going to be a writer. Like, I just can't remember a time in my whole life that this isn't what I wanted to do. Like, I've been just writing stories. So I couldn't tell you when the seminal moment is because I can't remember ever not wanting to do it.
I love it. And were you always a romance reader or are you a reader of other genres?
I read and have read a lot of mystery. And so I used to read, it was kind of a weird, slow journey into romance because I read a lot of like R.L. Stine and all of the Nancy Drew mysteries and like just a lot of kind of mystery, and I liked horror. And then I started reading Anne Rice in junior high, and I loved that. And so my friend said, okay, well, if you like vampires, you should try, I think it was Sherilyn Kenyon. And they're like, so it's like paranormal romance. And I did read Victoria Holt, who's kind of, old school historical romance. And I always loved that sort of sweeping Gothic feel. So, and then I just read, like, I tore through the Dark Hunter series really fast, and then I picked up anything I possibly could, I was hooked from there, because I'm like, you can get all of the best stuff of literature and this great romance and sexy times, like,
Mhm.
sign me up. So
I love it. So what was your journey to get that first book published?
let me think. I started going to RWA meetings because I had started writing and I knew that I was not good at it.
Mm-hmm.
So I went to a couple of conferences. I met critique partners who introduced me to my agent. And while I was shopping to New York, I put up a couple of novellas, like,
Mm-hmm.
well, several, about 8 or 9, up on Amazon, just kind of self-published. And then The Highwayman sold in 2014. Um, and my agent always tells me I owe her big for the hangover she had, because she said, I sold that because I went to drink with your editor, and, like, she doesn't drink ever, so it's like 2 drinks makes her so drunk. So she's like, I had a hangover the next day, but we got you we got you a contract, so woohoo. So that was the beginning of that. And then I've been with the same editor now for 5 years.
Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. So
Yeah.
let's talk about your writing. Do you follow an outline or do you see where the story leads you?
I'm definitely a pantser. I usually start out with characters, or a scene that I'm either wanting to start with or get to. So I'll be like, let's say in this, like, latest book, A Dark and Stormy Night, that I wrote that came out in June. I just knew I wanted to write this one scene in this garden. And I'm like, so I need to build a plot off of that scene and this character who's been in a bunch of the books, Carlton Morley. So most of the time I have some partners that I brainstorm with, like my same critique partners. And so I usually get up in the morning and kind of chit chat about maybe where the day's going to take me, but I often don't know what a book's going to do until my fingers are on the keys and it's happening. So I'll surprise myself a lot, like, oh, okay, well, this is happening now, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
So no process at all. I am the word. I could never teach anybody else to write, because I would be like, I don't know. Sit down and give it a go, I guess.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I think every person has their own process. And so if it works for you, just keep doing it. Don't
Yeah.
try to fix it or try to emulate somebody else's process. It may not work for you.
Exactly. And I tried to be more organized. I've tried to be better at planning, and every time I do, I fall apart, because again, it'll take me somewhere else, and then the rest of the plan doesn't work, and I feel like I wasted all of that time. So I keep it big.
So I got a question because you're a written series. How do you organize yourself? Keep track of all the characters, the the series, like all the different details within the series, as your pantser.
Very badly.
Okay.
Like, a lot of it is in my mind. Since I created the people, I feel like I remember them really well. So it's not like I'm going to forget their names or exactly what happened to them. But
Mm-hmm.
there are many times when I have to go back to manuscripts, and because I'm in the middle of another book and I have to go 4 books back and be like, okay, what time did that happen? Or how old were they? Or when was this? And so I really should make a Bible, and I've learned my lesson. So I'm like, okay, if I ever do a series that lasts this long again, I'll be more organized. But with the Victorian Rebels, I really didn't. I really
Mm.
didn't, and I should have. So yeah.
It's okay. So did you get like feedback from like maybe like copy editors or on your editor maybe like oh hold on, this happened in this book? You may get some feedback that way that maybe doesn't match the storyline.
No, I'm pretty good at keeping it all straight in my head.
Okay.
I'm not perfect, but I'm pretty good at it. And the only thing I did get called on is I set up in book 4 for the character in book 7 to kind of fall for this other person.
Mhm.
And it didn't work out that that was heroine. I just
Mm.
went in a different direction. So I did get a couple of emails that were like, but what about this lady over here? Like, wasn't he kind of flirting with her? Wasn't he thinking about her? And I'm like, yep, but didn't, that didn't pan out, I guess, because we went with this whole new other person. But I did that on purpose,
Okay.
mostly.
That's awesome. So let's talk about historical romance. What is the process like to write them? What kind of research do you conduct? Like, how do you go about creating this world that happened 100 years ago?
Um, I like research for me is actually my favorite part of the process. So, I do a lot of just like Googling. I do subscribe to, excuse me, a library, a historical resource at Trinity College because they have a lot of like um, things stored, information stored about how people lived, in different times, and like little things that I have to look up, like where's the bathroom located, or how many, how are things heated, because like technology changes so much between every decade, especially in the 19th century. So I'll do that, but a lot of it's just like random Googling, and I find a lot of like Wikipedia articles and then go to their works cited and, read those, or like blogs. So there's a lot of blogs that people are really interested in different times or about different events. And so I can lose myself really. Like sometimes I'll be like, oh, maybe I'll be done today, after, by 1 or 2 if I start early enough. And then I do 3 hours of like random reading about stuff, and then it takes me all day. So I have to be careful. But yeah, it's usually just like, thank God for Google, because I can't believe sometimes that people used to have to go to the library like go look stuff up, because I would be dead.
Yeah, I can imagine. It'll be like, what? So,
Hmm.
following questions come from the Romance community on Instagram. Thank you to Dad, Romance Book Junkie, Michelle, Macy Reeds, and Amanda gave me a book. So, let's start with their question. Is it difficult to balance the respect of historical accuracy with modern preferences of the reader?
I run into this a lot. I would say it's the most difficult thing. Um, because especially as like a lot of the movements that have gone through like that we're in the middle of right now, which I'm just so appreciative of, and so supportive of, but I feel like sometimes it makes it a little bit more difficult for modern readers to understand maybe the ideas and like the preferences of historical, like it's still, because it like modern sensibilities still don't change the facts of the past, right? So I struggle sometimes to make sure that my heroes, especially since I do write them dark and that kind of thing, are so kind of woke enough to be still heroic to the modern woman, while keeping them kind of historically accurate and alpha enough to have been a man of the 19th century. So sometimes I run into some moral conundrums there. So I have to be careful.
It's fascinating. So your book tend to be dark for the world historical romance. Is that what your writing style gravitates towards, or was it a conscious decision to set the series apart in a genre that's typically on the lighter side?
It's natural. It's what my writing gravitates toward. I really, like I said, I read mystery and horror, and Gothic historicals first. That's always been my love, and so it's a little bit more. And I'm not very funny. Like I can have moments where I'm like, oh, haha, that was a witty thing I said. That never happened. But like, I wish I could write lighter. Like I'll pick up a Tessa Dare book and I will giggle my way through it, and um really have a sense of like what do they call it, jealousy but like what do they call it? Like occupational jealousy or whatever, that I wish I had that kind of like quick snappy wit in my mind, and that kind of adorable uh hysterical, yeah, wit is really the only word I can think of. And
Mhm.
so, but it's just not there. But I do read a lot about murder, so like that usually ends
Mhm.
up in somewhere. But yeah, it's not intentional marketing wise. It's just what, if I'm going to write anything, that's what I'm going to write. I'm going to write about blood and gore and the dark realities of life, because that's kind of what I'm interested in. So
I love it. I think maybe just go back to your roots or else time, the books that you read growing up. So maybe just like setting it up in a historical setting. It's just part of
yeah.
it. So which book was the hardest to write?
Let's see. I would say probably The Duke with the Dragon Tattoo was the hardest for me to write. And that's only because like I kept getting interrupted by medical emergencies in my family. Like my husband had this like 2 foot long blood clot in his leg that he had to
Mm,
get surgery on. Um and then my daughter had surgery and my other daughter went to the hospital for 2 weeks, and
oh my
like
gosh.
everybody was, yeah, it was crazy. So I was just there was just a lot going on during that time. So it was actually late turning the book in, and I kept getting, yeah, kind of interrupted and trying to write while I'm worried about everything. And so I'm surprised that book did as well as it did, or that it even got finished, because that was just like the hardest year of my life, but it was the most rewarding book that I've ever written. It's still probably one of my favorites, the way it turned out. So
Awesome. So let's talk about the Victoria Rebel series. What type of research was involved when writing about Newgate?
I bought a book on it. I can't remember what it's called at the moment, and it's in a box somewhere. But I, I used to work at a jail in the medical department
Hmm.
for about 5 years, and I was just like their office manager.
Mm-hmm.
And I thought it was kind of fascinating, the dynamics of how people are when they're locked up, and the things that they do, how, what it does to them psychologically, how similar sometimes in my opinion, and this could be maybe a little bit controversial or whatever, but there were often times when I didn't see a lot of difference between the the actions and the inner moral compass of the prisoners and the detainers. Like I respected and liked a lot of the men that I worked with, but sometimes I didn't either, and I didn't agree with the laws that they had to uphold, or sometimes the way that they went around, uh, that they went about it. So, um, but I also really enjoyed working in a male-dominated field, because I think men are interesting, you know, their dynamics and that kind of thing. So that's, I think, why I wanted to write so much about Newgate, because it was a little bit more of a free for all back then. People had absolute power, like cops, and prisoners had no rights whatsoever. And so I thought, like, man, if this is difficult to be a part of today, imagine what it was then, you
Mm-hmm.
know? So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, pretty much a lot of it's real life experience plus trying to plug in the facts of what happened 150 years ago or whatever. So,
Fascinating. So, what made you decide to keep going with the Victoria Rebel series after the original six? Your six came with your publisher came to an end.
mostly emails from fans and being contacted about, saying Carlton has to have a story, Sebastian and Veronica have to have a story. Like, I always planned on doing a couple of more books. And I talked with my editor, and she kind of always talked about, like, there would probably be another little bit. And so I set those stories up to be written. And then when they decided to go in a different direction and wanted to start a new series, I felt really bad leaving my characters in a place where they didn't get their happily ever after, especially when so many people were emailing me about like, but what about these guys? What else, like, what are you doing starting a
Mhm.
new series? We gotta it's not finished. Like,
Mhm.
so that was pretty much most of it. It's just I felt like I owed it to um the characters, and even more I owed it to the people who were asking for the stories. So
I love it. Who were your influences for Victoria Rebel series, if there were any?
like specifically character wise, I could say a lot of people, but I always say like this is my this story or this is my that story. Like Dorian, like the Highwayman would be my Count of Monte Cristo story, kind of. It's one of my favorite
Mhm.
books of all time. Um, and I was really into Dexter when I was writing The Hunter, and I liked the idea of an assassin. And his heroine Millie, I looked a lot into like Sarah Bernhardt and some of the like big grand dames of the theater at the time. So there's a lot of things and people and books and tropes and everything that sort of influence my stories, but I couldn't say for the entire series that there was one influence.
So you self-published a book. What was some of the most surprising thing you learned from self-publishing your book 7 of the Return Rebel series?
Um, Surprising things. I feel like the most surprising thing is like sort of having the freedom to take a story in any direction you want. There's a freedom that comes with that that's really exciting, and then there's also kind of some anxiety that comes with that because you're like, what if I break some rule and everybody decides this is the worst thing I've ever done? So it's
Mhm.
I wouldn't say I was surprised super much, but um I think that's mostly it. It's just not having anybody before it comes out really who is an industry professional tell you yes or no, this is marketable or this isn't marketable. You kind of have to trust yourself on that
Mhm.
score. So I would say that's the most.
Yeah, I can imagine there's probably a lot of freedom just basically, putting the work out there and like not having to be accountable to you have deadlines that you set yourself, but it's not industry led deadlines of getting
Mhm,
the
mhm.
work out.
Right.
So awesome. So let's start with the Devil You Know series. Each book we
Mhm.
follow the Red Rose, a group of friends who have each other's back and will support each other to the end. What was an important showcase of unconditional love within the friendship?
I think it's because I've always had those fierce female friendships where it's sort of like, I'll bury a body for you, and you say
Mm-hmm.
that, like to your friends, like I will come and hide the bodies. I love you that much kind of thing. And so I kind of thought like, well, what if they actually had to? Like, what if that was a secret they actually had to do? It's like they did bury the body together kind of thing. And so I think that those kind of relationships are just as powerful as the relationships you have with the partner in your life, or the man or woman or other that you love, And so I wanted that to be something where, the women are in competition. There's not an ex that's a villain. That they're not vilifying other women. They're very close and they could be each other's support whether they had love in their life or not. So it wasn't a man that completed them because they already completed each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I really love the friendships. Like, I just love the fact that they were like so they had each other's back. Like, it was just like a sense like they traveled the world, they grew their life, and they were like able to support each other to the end. Like, there was no question about it, and
Oh yeah.
it was just like you're ride or die. This group of
Yeah.
friends.
Well, and
So
my editor keeps telling me too, like this is a fantasy story that you're writing. Like this is all about fantasy, and like one of the fantasies that I like to fulfill, or that's like a fantasy or reality for me, is that kind of like not just having a ride or die guy, but also having, that whole support system, that whole tribe, like people who will be with you through everything, you know.
yeah. and they both, you know, the characters that we met Alexandra, we met Cecilia, we met Francesca. They all have like a life full before they fall in love. Like they were able to, you know, go to school or just have businesses or do something. Like, and they support each other in that process. That it wasn't just like they're in the marriage march looking for a husband. Like they
Yes,
had,
that was important to me. Yeah, their life could have been completely full and happy whether they found a man or not. I thought that that was really
yeah.
important for me to write that.
So this was really cool. Alexandra went through a major trauma on Paige that affected her relationship and what she wants in life. What was it important to showcase her healing process in this book?
I think I read a lot of books that deal with this subject and kind of the objectification or like the turning them into victims or damsels if you have been a victim of
Mhm.
sexual assault. And so I thought, you know, I thought I know a lot of people, and as a survivor myself, that it might be interesting to show a way of being that is other than that, that like you don't need necessarily, again, like you don't need a man to heal you or to show you healing or to like fix any of that. Like they definitely, the right one can help and the right one can fit into your life. And but like that she made herself a whole person
Mhm.
and an entire being with an entire full life, and found some happiness, and still had to deal with her trauma and still had to work around it and learn how to function like we all do.
Mhm.
But she was able to do it, and because she was able to do it, she was whole enough to fall in love also, and with the right man who did the right things and treated her the right way
Mhm.
most of the time, not all the time. He had some stuff that he had to,
Yeah.
he had some stuff he had to fix.
Yeah, he had some rough edges, but I think it worked.
But
Like it was just like it worked. I think the whole relationship, how it grew, like it made sense. Like I think it was
right.
just like it was just perfection. So
Thank
let's talk
you.
about Cecilia. She inherits a gambling hall in a school for ladies that has a lot of secrets. Her hero is trying to catch her. Why share this conflict in the story? Like they were pretty much at odds, and yet they were attracted to each other.
Hmm. I really like it when people change their minds about something that they'd had preconceived notions. You know, like this was kind of like, I wouldn't say my Pride and Prejudice because it doesn't have anything to do with Pride and Prejudice, but it kind of had that like where both people were definitely in the right and trying to do the right thing and had the right intentions. You know, she wanted to allow these women to make a living how they wanted to make a living, and she
Mhm.
wanted to carry on her family dynamic and keep a business open. And he was worried about women being objectified and breaking the law and, you know, being used the way they shouldn't be. And so I think I wanted to show that like sometimes you can approach things from a different perspective, and it doesn't mean that either perspective is wrong, but, or maybe both perspectives are wrong until you learn to understand each other and
Mhm.
try and like learn to work together, you know? So I really like that sort of opposites attract trope too. And so this is one of the first times that I really got to delve into that. And I was happy with how it turned out. So
You did. It turned out really well. So, how difficult was it to write Phoebe?
not difficult at all. I have daughters, and I actually, they're stepdaughters. So they were 2, 4, and 6 when I met them. They were 4, 6, and 8 when we got married, and now they're all in their early 20s. And so writing about Phoebe or about kids that maybe didn't start out as yours, but that you really come to love and fall in love with, that's really easy for me to mine that kind of emotion and data. So I do that all the time. You know, I tend to write that a little bit more sometimes than even mothers of their own kids. And I didn't realize that I did that until I went back and looked over all, you know, all of the books that I have. And I'm like, you know, most of the kids I write about are not born to the woman who ends up raising them, and
Mm-hmm.
that was not on purpose, but I guess it comes out of me sometimes. So
I love this. What can we expect of Francesca's book?
Let's see, without any spoilers, it will be a second chance romance. And definitely secrets, because like this isn't a spoiler really, but like Francesca was not born Francesca, right? So she was born somebody else, and so she and the hero of the story have a past, but it's not her past. It's a past of someone she's pretending to be. So there will be
Mm.
a lot, yeah, there'll be a lot of explosive chemistry, but there's also, secrets and revenge and lots of passion. So I think it's actually, of all three of the books, it was my favorite to write.
Mhm.
So I'm hoping people will enjoy it.
I can't wait. So now let's go to a round of book recommendations. It's an opportunity for you to share with the audience what they should read next. What is your favorite genre?
I would say mystery is my favorite genre, which is hard to tie down because it's in everything. I love mystery romance. I love mystery thriller. I love like those dark psychological mysteries that everybody's putting out right now. Like if you can just keep me glued to the page trying to figure out who did something or what's about to happen, like I'm here for it. So,
Who are your favorite authors?
um, so I would say for romance, Karen Marie Moning and Lisa Kleypas are at my very top. So Karen Marie Moning does a lot of like paranormal, and that's kind of was my first love when I was reading romance. And so I love her. Like I'm very Irish and Scottish and Welsh, and so I love all of her Celtic druid. Like I just go nuts about that kind of stuff. So and then Lisa Kleypas just writes historicals so lush and so perfectly, and she's just kind of the queen of get like the the best character study, like there have been books that I've read of hers that I'm like, this is not a meaty plot, like there's not a ton going on here, but there's so much inside of these characters that I can't not read about them. And that's like a very specific talent, I think, that I'm envious of a little bit. And then I would also say Christopher Moore is my favorite author, and he writes uh, kind of comedy. He
Hmm.
writes, yeah, like he has a lot of romance in his stories too, but he writes like my favorite book of his is, well, it's two books. It's A Dirty Job and Secondhand Souls. And
Mm-hmm.
it's about this guy who becomes death, or like a reaper,
Mm-hmm.
but he owns a thrift store, and he's a widower, and he has a kid, like a toddler, and she's accidentally the Antichrist, and it's just hysterical. And he falls in love
Mm.
with a nun. Like it's just so funny, and you're giggling through the whole thing. So he does, like, everything he writes is good. I've never read a book of his that I didn't absolutely love. So
I love it. What has been a book you read this past year or last year that you love?
oh, um let's see. I read Private Lies by Cynthia St. Aubin, was really fantastic. And she also has a book out. She has one that's like Love. See, it's like Love Bites,
Mm-hmm.
which is sort of like, I don't know if you've ever read Mary Janice Davidson, but it's sort of like a paranormal comedy.
Yeah.
So there's like Love Bites, Love Sucks, and Love Lies, I believe, are the all three. And it's kind of about this woman who gets a job at an art gallery, but she doesn't realize that it's run by a pack of werewolves. And I giggle through the whole thing, but it's really hot and really good. So
That looks
I would
so
say that's,
good.
yeah. Oh, it's so good. It's so good.
Tell us where we can find you online.
Um, I'm pretty much everywhere. I'm not on Twitter very often because like everybody's so mad. Like, I don't
Yeah.
check it very much. But I'm on Instagram just at Kerrigan Byrne, or Facebook. You can find me Kerrigan Byrne also. I have a website, kerriganbyrne.com. Like, luckily, I don't have a name that everybody else has, so I don't have to do I don't have to do a lot of like numbers or dashes or anything.
Yeah.
So you can find me anywhere. Or my email is kerrigan@gmail.com. So
Awesome. Well,
I'm always around.
thank you, Kerrigan, for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. You're so fun to talk to.
If you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to share with friends, subscribe, or rate and review the show. This is the easiest way to support this podcast. Want to join a romance loving community? Want weekly book recommendations, monthly author Q&As, and book recommendation meetups? Make new friends? Then join our Patreon community. To sign up, please follow the links in the show notes. What to Read Next podcast is part of the Frolic Podcast Network. Find more podcasts to love on frolic.media/podcast. Thank you so much for listening and have a great day.